Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's shatter some paradigms. And the paradigm I want to share today concerns woke or racist. I find this kind of interesting. This ties into my ongoing discussion about identity politics. And I realize I've made quite a few videos of identity politics, in part because I have a book coming out. Don't know when, but it's coming out. And I've been thinking and doing research on this topic. You know, I have a very interesting career. I am a race scholar. I've written about race, how to deal with race. And I'm a conservative Christian. And so that puts me in a very unique position. I've found that even though I'm a race scholar and I have knowledge about racial issues, my solutions don't fit exactly where a lot of people who are race scholars fit. They are more of the anti-racist variety. I am not that. I also find as a Christian that as I try to talk to Christians about dealing not just with the racial issues, but with some other issues that my sociological training has given me insight, that I don't fit within the sort of narrow scope of Christian identity politics. You know, I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not a Republican. I don't fit in there. And so sometimes I've been seen as woke. I don't see myself being called racist that often. I think because I'm an African American and I've studied racial issues, I do remember one time I was called a racist when I was doing a blog, and one of the commenters said, "You're racist," because of some comment I made. And that commenter was quickly corrected by other commenters who said, "Hey, have you looked at him? He's African American. And also, he's written a lot about racial issues. He may not be that much of a racist." I have been called white adjacent, which means that I sort of like white people more than maybe I like people of color. I have been told that I'm too nice to white people. So while people have not directly to my face often called me racist, they've implied that I'm, I guess, a term you may recognize as an Uncle Tom or an Oreo. And, you know, that is what it is. So I've definitely been called woke, and I've definitely have been called, if not racist, a Tom, white adjacent, these sort of things. Why is that happening, and what do I think about it? Well, to understand this, we have to go back to identity politics. The people who call me this are steeped in identity politics, either on racial issues for African Americans or on conservative Christian issues, which are the two groups I'm going to include in my book. So what happens is that identity politics carries with it this oppressor-oppressed paradigm. And people are either oppressors or they're the oppressed. And the oppressors, we dehumanize. They must be defeated at all costs. They cannot be allowed to win. They are the enemy. Now here's something. When you're at war, and I mean a real war, shooting war, bullets, grenades, all that sort of stuff, one of the ways in which we train people to kill other people is by training them to dehumanize. To kill other people is by training them to dehumanize other people. So we come up with terms, dehumanizing terms, to describe the enemy. I really don't want to even say them because they're disgusting. You probably know some of these terms that they were used by the Japanese Americans, the German Americans in World War II. It becomes easier to try to destroy others when we dehumanize them. The oppressed must be destroyed. Therefore, it is acceptable to dehumanize them. I see terms such as woke and racism as attempts at dehumanization. And when there's ideas that threaten our ideas, and remember, in identity politics, we cannot lose. If we lose, the oppressed gets oppressed even more. So when someone challenges our ideas, they must be stopped. Having nice little dehumanizing labels is cool. That person's woke. Of course they're going to think that way. Why would you even listen to them? That person's a racist. What good can they offer to us? Woke and racism quickly become labels used in identity politics to stop conversation, to force our ideas on others without much opposition. So, the fact that I don't fully fall in with either group, I definitely believe we need to deal with institutional racism. We can't ignore it. Colorblindness drives me crazy, but anti-racism does not work. And I've discussed in some of my videos why it does not work. And I won't go with something that does not work that I think can make things worse. On the other hand, I have written plenty on Christianophobia, maybe more than any other academic out there. It is a problem, it's real. And so I definitely want to address it. But to me, addressing it is not falling lockstep in with a president who I feel manipulates conservative Christians for his own political gain. Now, I may be wrong on that. You may disagree with me on that. That's fine. That's where I come from. And so I'm not going to fall in with what some conservative Christians are doing to address this. That may make me woke. I'm okay with this. I have to learn how to be okay with this. Because using nuance and insight to get at real problems means you're going to irritate those on either extreme. And if we're going to allow the extremes to dictate to us how we're going to look at issues, how we're going to deal with issues, we will never get anywhere in our society. So do I like it? No. Do I like having to deal with these labels and work my way through them? Absolutely not. But I know why it's happening, therefore I accept it. And we will keep fighting against those extremes who are polarizing and tearing us apart. It is important that we think about nuance, not just lumping everyone into an oppressed and oppressor dichotomy. It's important to think that answers are found in multiple groups and not just our own group. When you go in that direction, and if you go in that direction honestly, strongly, you will get fire from both sides. In my book, I outline someone who probably is more hated than I am by these groups. In fact, I know is more hated than I am by these groups. I will not give you his name right now because I've not asked for permission for his name, although I did ask for permission to put his name in the book and he gave that. So you have to read the book in order to find out who this is. And I respect him for that, even though I don't always agree with some of the things he argues for. I think that the way to truth and honesty is through this sort of polarization and dealing with these sort of labels, as distasteful as they may be. In the African American community, there's a tradition of using the N-word and using it as, well, hey, N-word to another African American. Trying to take that label and to sort of reduce it, to throw it back. One of the ugliest labels there is. In fact, I don't like this tradition. I'm just noting it. And my kids will not be using the N-word in that way. But I will say there is something to be said about taking an intended label, a label intended to minimize you, take you out of the conversation and say, okay, I'm fine if you're going to give me that label. I know it's not true about me, but if this is the cost to promote a more nuanced, a better approach, then I'll pay that cost. If you decide that you want to not fall into the extremes, but push forward in a more nuanced, thoughtful manner, you may have to decide what to do with these labels as well. You may have to toughen your skin. Let me just close with this. One of the things I did when I was in college, one of the jobs I did was I was a referee for intramural games. I refereed football and basketball and volleyball, anything I could make some money on because I was broke. I never thought that job would prepare me for my life later on. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to become a professional referee, but it did. Because when you're a ref, you develop thick skin. You have to. You can't tee up everyone just because they say something you don't like or they have a slight complaint. those referees are poor. They are so insecure they can't do a good job. That kind of prepared me because I have thick skin now. And I'm not easily insulted. And I think those of us who want to push for a better way may have to have a thick skin. Maybe we should referee a few games. Does this share some paradigms? Paradigms about being labeled woke or racist? Are we willing to accept that in order to go forward? And I know for a white person to be labeled racist, I know how hard that can be. If you consider the source, then perhaps you could push forward as well, because we need your ideas as well. I hope you enjoy this. If you have some comments, please leave them. If I will welcome you subscribing if this is the sort of conversation you want to have. You disagree with me, leave comments. That's fine. Well, thanks. And come back once again when we can shatter some more paradigms.